Hello, everyone. It's Chrissy here, career coach and corporate trainer, and founder of eatyourcareer.com, helping you create a nourishing professional life. Thank you so much for being here today. We are doing our Q&A session. It's Ask the Career Coach time. So I am answering all of your career and workplace related questions. I have several that have been submitted already through the online form. Thank you to those of you who did that. And then, of course, if you're joining us for the live session, you can always type your question into the chat menu, and I will take a moment before we wrap up today and make sure that I address all of the questions there. So really quickly, it looks like people are saying hello in chat. That's fantastic. I do want to make sure that you can hear me and see me as always. So if you would type the word yes into chat, that will just reassure me. I always am a little bit nervous that I'm talking to myself on these sessions. It's happened before. So I certainly appreciate hearing from all of you. I'm seeing all the yeses come in. Thank you. Fantastic. Okay, we're good to go. As I said, I have some really good questions that were submitted this month through the Q&A form. So I'm going to go through those first, and then I do want to make sure that I get over to the chat menu and answer your questions there. So just make sure that you tag your question. There's a little drop-down box, I believe, that allows you to mark your question as a question. So it pops up in red for me. That way you guys can carry on in the chat and your questions will stick out. So I know to answer them before we wrap up. In the meantime, as I answer questions, be sure that you share your experiences and your best practices and all of your wonderful wisdom in the chat menu with one another. All right. With that, I see everybody's kind of chiming in with where they're from and saying hello. And I just see Brenda here in Las Vegas, and I know a lot of us, our thoughts and our prayers and our hearts are going out to those of you in Las Vegas. We've had a lot of big news recently. It seems like every month that I jump on a session, there's something big that's kind of going on in the world. And I always debate whether or not it's something to address. But I know that whenever any of us are seeing somebody chiming in from Las Vegas, that's what we're thinking about. And we're just hoping everyone is okay, friends and family and all of that. So let's move on and talk about career questions. So I have lots of good ones, and my first one today starts like this. I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole thing, even though there's some extra information in here. This person starts off by saying, Chrissy, your coaching sessions are great. I always love hearing that. And then it says, however, which is always fun. So, however, until organizations can start to see the value that the older, and then in parentheses it says 69, that the older employee brings to the organization, the only one that can help me get a job is my higher power. I have a bachelor's in nursing, MA in organizational behavior, MBA, it lists the date and the GPA. I'm planning on taking my PMP certification, that's project management certification, in November. However, I'm giving that a lot of thought, given the fact that in 4 years, I have not been successful in finding a job. I need to work 10 more years full time so I don't have a mortgage once retired. If you have any advice on how to write a cover letter, that would be great. I'm straightforward in my cover letter about my age and the years of working. There's no point in not being upfront because you only have to go on the internet and Google names and get basic information such as name, address, and age. So I like this question. There's a lot of information here, but basically what this person is saying is that she is a mature employee at 69 years old and having some trouble trying to find a job and being very honest and upfront in the cover letter about age. So lots of things I want to share here. You guys can see all my scribbly notes. This is how my notes look. I always just kind of jot down the important points that I want to share. And with this particular question, I have lots of important points. So the first one that I want to share is that I want you to think of your cover letter and your resume as marketing documents. So if you think about like a brochure for a product, every product has some drawbacks and has some downsides, but you're never going to see those things in the brochure. And the same thing needs to be true for your cover letter and your resume. So I really would strongly urge anyone to not reference your age directly in your cover letter or your resume. Yes, it is true that people can go out there, they can go online, they can search, they're going to figure out your age. There's no point in hiding it. And I'm not saying that you should necessarily hide it, but you don't want to go about advertising that. You have to remember that age is also a protected class. So anyone over 40 can't be discriminated against. It's illegal to discriminate against them. Some states, it's also illegal to discriminate people who are younger. So age is kind of a delicate topic. And when you're citing it directly on your resume, it just can look a little bit out of step with the norm. It's kind of like something like race, right? So race is also a protected class, and people can figure it out just by looking at you. They can maybe look at other information on your resume to figure it out, but you wouldn't necessarily in your cover letter directly address the race question because it would look out of step. So I encourage you not to talk directly about your age in your cover letter. What I would encourage you to do is to emphasize exactly what you said in your question, and that is the value that an older employee brings to an organization. The value is all about your wonderful achievements, the things that you've done that have had a direct impact to the bottom line of the organizations that you've served in the past. So what came out in the question was a lot of education. You know, there's a bachelor's and a master's and an MBA and potentially a PMP certification. Education is fantastic, but I want you to think of that as icing on the cake. The main portion of the cake should be the accomplishments in the workplace. That is what is most compelling to prospective employers. So don't overemphasize the educational aspect, especially because there's so much of it that can make you then appear overqualified, and you don't want to be ruling yourself out on that basis. If you've been job searching for 4 years, it is definitely time to reassess your search strategies and to reassess how you're writing that cover letter. If you are directly addressing the age issue, as you said, rethink that strategy. I would go back through your resume and make sure that the emphasis is on the accomplishments, the things that you've specifically delivered, and not so much on the education piece. That is kind of the bottom wrap-up feature that just says, yes, I do have the theoretical knowledge as well, but the practical application is what the employers care about. The practical application is what's seen in the accomplishments. So I hope that that is helpful for this question. Lots of different pieces to that, but it was a wonderful question and I appreciate you sending it in. All right, we're moving on. Our next question says, having the expectations discussion with my new boss in my new organization, please provide pointers and examples of how to proceed. Excellent. So this is great. If you are able to sit down with your boss in a new organization, in a new role, and map out expectations, you're on a good road. This is a good sign of things to come. I saw a presenter a few weeks ago. I was at a conference in Las Vegas. I know some of you were probably there at the Administrative Professionals Conference. And we had a wonderful presenter named Carla Harris. And she talked about the fact that if you can't define what success looks like, that means that the goalposts are always changing and you're never going to be successful. So fantastic that you get the opportunity to sit down with your boss and define what success is going to look like. You're doing that right from the very beginning. I encourage everyone, whatever phase you are in your career, to have that conversation so you know what success looks like. For this particular person sitting down early on in this position, new boss, new organization, I recommend that you just keep in mind the SMART goal format. So SMART is 5 elements. It's an acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Those are the 5 things that you need to be capturing here. So for specific, what specifically do I need to achieve? Not so much what do I need to do, but what are the results of doing that thing? What do those results actually look like? Measurable. So is there some sort of measurement to that? How much? How many? Is there a certain number that you're trying to reach there? So there needs to be some sort of a measurable aspect. Sometimes the measurable aspect has to do with quality. And in that case, define what quality actually looks like and who determines the quality of what's been delivered. So the A is for achievable, and you just want to make sure that it's something that you feel is reasonable for yourself with effort. Relevant is the R. If you don't understand how it's relevant to your department goals or your organization goals, that's a great question to ask of your boss when you're sitting down talking about expectations. Okay, how does this actually impact these other initiatives and these other goals that we have in the broader enterprise? And then the T is for time bound. So make sure that you attach some sort of timeliness to these things that you're talking about. You know, are you expected to achieve something within the next 6 months, within the next year, within the next quarter, whatever it is, those are the things to capture. So 5 elements there. I also recommend that you put together a summary of the conversation when you're done. And you outline exactly what those SMART goals actually look like and make sure that you gain approval from your boss. Just you're reiterating, okay, here's what I captured from our conversation. I want to make sure that we're both on the same page, that there was no miscommunication, no misinterpretation on my part, and make sure that your boss comes back to you and says, yep, excellent. That looks exactly like what we talked about. Or maybe he or she will have some revisions, but that's great. Because it just makes sure that you know in the future you heard correctly and that you're both aiming in the same direction. It doesn't mean that those goals or expectations won't change in the future, but at least you're starting off on the right foot by capturing all of the important elements, those 5 pieces of SMART, and putting in some documentation around it. So great question and good luck to you. All right, our next question is from Leslie, who I did meet actually at APC. Hello, Leslie. Hope you're on the call today. So Leslie asks, how can I de-stress at my desk without losing productivity and time? This question really got me. I read it earlier this week, I believe. So how do I de-stress at my desk without losing productivity or time? I've been thinking about this because there is kind of this trade-off that we think about. You know, we think about self-care. Self-care is really important for managing stress. But then we think, gosh, you know, investing time in self-care means my productivity goes down and I lose time to be working on other things that are more productive. So we kind of look at this trade-off that happens. And what I have found is that sometimes those self-care activities, while they take time, they actually do improve our productivity and they minimize wasted time. So I'll give you a quick example here and then I'll talk specifics about de-stressing at your desk. So over the past week, I've had a new person that I'm kind of helping to get through some things, kind of working as kind of a spiritual mentor for her, and spending a lot of time with this person, trying to help her with some things going on in her life. It's a time investment on my part, but also what I've found is that it's very enriching for me on a spiritual level. You know, to help someone on this level is spiritually rewarding. It feeds something really important in my soul. And what I find is, though, even though I am giving a lot of time to this activity, it's actually making me more productive in other areas of my life because it's feeding something important in me. So I find that when I'm back at work, I'm feeling more creative. I'm feeling more energized. I'm feeling more positive. Even though I have less time, the time that I'm spending at work right now, I'm really on my game. And part of it is because I'm focused so much on this activity that is very nourishing for me. So I encourage you to think of self-care as being productive, even though it takes time. At your desk, things to do are things. I just glanced over at the chat menu and I see that somebody's put this in here. Stretching, like physical body movement is a big thing. There's a lot of news coverage lately about the sitting disease, is what they call it. Sitting at your desk creates all sorts of negative impacts long-term health-wise. And so the more that you can stand up, stretch, move around even at your desk, the better it is for your physical health. And that's a big thing with stress, because stress is wearing down your body physically. So if you can help repair your body physically, you're not only countering the negative impacts of stress, but you're also de-stressing at the same time. So physical movement at your desk. I'm a big fan of the standing desks, and I personally want a treadmill desk. I think that would just be such a fantastic thing for stress management and physical health. Not everybody can do that. I personally can't do that right now, but any movement. Also, I'm a big fan of things like, just a nice warm cup of tea that helps to, kind of manage my anxiety and stress when I'm having a crazy day. Breath work is really important as well. When I'm stressed or really focused on a project, my breathing becomes really shallow. I was working late last night and I noticed when I went to bed that I was breathing hard because I had been so focused on what I was doing at my desk. My breath had become really shallow. And then by the time that I lay down, I'm actually, breathing hard like I've just run a marathon or something. So to counter that, we have to focus on deep breath work just at our desks and reminding ourselves to pause regularly, to do, some like 5 deep breaths. Sometimes I've seen, Google or calendar alerts. I've had calendar alerts for myself in the past to remind me of things like that. They're really helpful for a time, and then I start to find them irritating, so I take them off. But maybe for a time, do that just to get yourself back in kind of the habit of thinking about your breath. I'm also a big fan of walking. So again, it's that physical exercise, but I love to just go and walk outside of the office. I try to keep tennis shoes with me pretty much anywhere, in my car. When I worked at a traditional full-time employment at my desk, I always had tennis shoes under my desk to go out and just walk on lunch. That is so useful. And again, I know it's like 20, 30 minutes away from your desk, but that's useful time. You're going to come back to your desk. It's going to reduce your wasted time from mistakes or stress that's making it difficult for you to focus. You're going to be more focused. You're going to be more creative. You're going to be more energized. So even though it feels like it's inefficient to get up and walk away from your desk for 20 or 30 minutes, it's not. It really does pay off, when you get back to your desk. So I hope that is helpful, and thanks for the question, Leslie. All right, our next question here. This person says, I'm in the situation where I feel my skills have outgrown my current position. My boss recognizes this and gives me more projects and more complicated tasks. However, not more pay or a new job title. I am feeling like other people might probably relate to this. It's really common. So this person says, in addition, she also does not want to let me go. I'm her right hand and she's very protective of keeping me. I guess my question is, how can I encourage career growth in this situation? Great question. So fantastic. You're getting more projects, you're getting more complicated work, but no raise and no title change. So your career growth, it's kind of happening, like your skills are being expanded, you're getting more things to work on, but on paper, the money and the title aren't there. So my recommendation is, first off, I'm just curious if you have specifically asked for what you want. So often people want the raise, they want the title change, and they dance around the topic. And I can't stress enough how important it is to be straightforward and direct and make a specific request with what you're looking for. You have to do a little bit of research because you're going to have to figure out, okay, what is the right title for the role that I'm really doing right now, considering that I'm taking on all these more complicated tasks and bigger projects. What's the appropriate title for this change that I want? And what's the appropriate pay raise that I should be looking at? Have some evidence to back up what you're asking for and take that in and have a direct and honest conversation so that it's very clear what you're looking for from your boss. I always encourage, whenever you have a conversation about your career, to make sure that you take in with you your accomplishments list. Back to accomplishments. You're talking about the value that you're delivering. So make sure that you are able to really cite all of these, bigger projects and more complicated things that you've been working on and the impact that those things are having on the company. So take that in, take your evidence, and talk about what you want from your career path at this organization. If you go in and you have this conversation and your boss continues to not want to give you the higher pay or the better title, but wants to continue having you do all this work, you have a decision to make. A strategy that is an effective strategy is to get a competing offer, to go and, put yourself back on the job market and find another organization that would be willing to hire you at the wage that you're looking for, at the title that you want, and let your boss know that you do have a competing offer. A lot of times that can light a fire. You have to recognize that it might not, and that even though you say that your boss really, is very protective and wants to keep you, you don't want to go in thinking that you have all the leverage in the world. There are times when, even though they want to keep you, if you come in with a competing offer, they won't be able to compete. And you need to realize that if you decide to take that gamble. But a big thing that I think people tend to forget is that a lot of time, I won't say always, but very frequently, in order to truly advance in your career and have a significant jump in pay or title, you have to go to a different organization. It's just the way that it works. Unfortunately, once you are in an organization, you have less leverage than you do when you are outside of an organization negotiating your way in. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's just the way that it works. So that's why I always advise people, if you have gone, more than 4 or 5 years without any sort of a pay raise or title change, and you've been stagnant within an organization, if your conversations aren't resulting in some sort of a growth in those areas, then you need to look outside of the organization, because it's just, it's one of those things that it's a pattern that I see all the time as a career coach. My fellow career coaches see this pattern all the time as well. It's very counterintuitive. You would think that when you're in an organization, you would have more negotiation and more leverage, and it just isn't that way. They know that you're there. They know that it's hard for you to go and leave and have and launch a job search. So they tend to be much more restrictive in raises and passing out, new job titles. So consider going to a different organization. Thanks for the question. All right, this next question. Okay, we've got lots of information here. So this question says, I work in a local municipality and I'm not thrilled about the current situation of the organization. I like what I do. I'm an executive assistant for the interim executive director. I used to work for the city manager. As far as admin, I can't go anywhere except director of one of the departments, but don't feel equipped for either because no one will be leaving anytime soon. If so, it's by force. I have my MBA, but I feel that I'm too mature to leave. I've only been here for 6 years, but invested by my past government experience. Not sure if I should try to make the best of it for the next 4 years or find something else. Please help. Okay, so we have someone who is not thrilled with their current organization. Seems like the work is pretty good, but current organization doesn't have a lot of room for career growth. And this person says they're too mature to leave. So we've got a more senior employee trying to figure out, okay, she says for the next 4 years. So it sounds like kind of, pre-retirement. Is it worthwhile to go out and get a new job, or should I just stick with what I've got for the time being, even though it's not perfect? So it depends. There's no clear answer. The question is really, what's working and what's not. If you think about what's not working, are these things that can change? You said you're not happy with the organizational situation. Some of those things might be within your control. Some of those things might totally be outside of your control. How do you feel in terms of your acceptance? Are you willing and able to accept things kind of as they are? When you look at a job search, you have to remember that it's always a risk. We try our best to evaluate the situation from the outside, looking in and figure out, okay, what does this culture look like? What does this organization look like? What does this role look like? But you never really know for sure until you're in the role. So there's inherent risk in a job search. Right now, you have a situation that you do know, and you know what it is. You're okay with it. You're just not thrilled. So if you want to go and find thrilling, it's going to be an intense job search. You've got to be really clear on what it is that you're looking for. You need to frame up, like we were talking about before, resume and cover letter, frame that up the right way for this new organization and new role that you'd be going for, especially being a mature employee. And then, you'd need to accept the fact that it is a risk, and in your last 4 years pre-retirement, is that something that you want to be going through? I have worked with people before pre-retirement where they've had this kind of debate, and I've had people go either way. I remember one person in particular who said, I'm just going to kind of stick it out. And instead, what I'm going to do is focus on my retirement plan. And that was very fulfilling for this person. She had a few years left with her organization where she wasn't thrilled, but the idea of launching a job search to go and find the ideal job for the last few years before retirement just seemed a little too much for her. So she focused on creating her retirement plan and really putting into place things that were going to make retirement really great for her. And so that is one strategy that I've seen success with. Because remember that retirement creates all kinds of emotional complexity. There's a loss of identity. You've got more time on your hands. It sounds like it'd be so fantastic, but it can create a lot of turmoil if you're not prepared for it. So taking some time to prepare for it might be a really wonderful thing to do. And stay in a job where what it is, you're comfortable there, you've got good things going in terms of benefits, that could work for you, but it's your choice. I always love to inspire people to go after a job and a career that really is very fulfilling and nourishing to them. But I also want you to take a realistic approach and choose something that works for where you are in your life. In 4 years pre-retirement, you've got some other things to consider. So hopefully that just helps you as you're mulling over your options here. Unfortunately, I can't just give you a simple, go do this sort of answer. There's a lot of considerations there. But thank you so much for submitting the question. All right, this is the last question that's been submitted through the form, and we've got lots of time to answer questions in chat. So make sure that you type those in and mark them as a question so I can go and take care of those before we wrap up. All right, this question says, working on resume updates, what is a good internet source I can go to for assistance? Well, I'm glad you asked. I have a variety of resume resources that are available for you. There is a whole webinar that we did on this a few months ago in the resource library That webinar was recorded and it talks about the main principles of resume writing. So I would encourage you to go look at that in the library. It's under webinar replays. And I also have a resume and cover letter toolkit, which outlines all of the principles in much more detail. It gives you some templates and some samples to follow. It's basically all of the knowledge that I have of resume and cover letter writing put into the most simple format possible in a downloadable ebook. So that would be another recommendation for you. I have the link to that. I'm going to see if I can just drop it into chat and make lives easy for everyone. So I just posted the link for that, that e-guide if you're interested in revising your resume or cover letter. And then finally, I also do resume revision services. My services are very extensive. I'm a certified copy editor, so I do have an extensive background with writing this particular style of document. Remember that a resume and a cover letter are unique documents. They're not written like other documents in the workplace. They're not written like anything else that we see in the world. It's this disembodied third person voice that we use in a resume. Cover letters have some specific things that are supposed to be talked about. So if you want that kind of assistance, if you want somebody to come in and actually do the resume for you, I'm happy to help with that. You can learn more about that on my website under services. You'll see resume and cover letter revision there. I'm happy to chat with you about it if you're interested. But take advantage of the free webinar, check out the e-guide, do some things on your own before you consider actually working with a professional to have it done for you. The reason being is that you're going to be writing resumes for the rest of your life, for the rest of your career. So it's useful to learn the principles. I don't particularly like doing resume revisions for people because I would rather you learn the principles so you can continue to revise your resume for the rest of your career on your own, and you don't have to continue paying me or some other professional to do it for you. So invest the time and energy and a couple of bucks in the e-guide to learn how to do these things for yourself. That way, for the next 20, 30, 40 years, however long you're working, you're going to be well equipped to create a really strong resume for whatever kind of role you're looking for. All right, so I see lots of questions have come in through chat. I'm going to start at the bottom of the list and work my way up. So thank you everyone who put your questions in. Let's see what we've got here. All right, we have someone who says, I am 56 and taken a leap by applying for my dream job, woohoo, in my existing institution. Fantastic. It has been a while since I've interviewed. Do you have suggestions for practice interview questions? Absolutely. So interviewing is one of my favorite topics. And I do suggest that you practice. Internal interviews sometimes are a little bit more casual, they're less formal, but you want to prepare as if it's going to be a formal interview process because you just never know. I'll give you broadly the principles to be aware of, and then I'll give you a couple of great questions and I'll give you a resource. So broad principles. Talk about those accomplishments. I am like nailing this one all day today. I know that. But accomplishments are your career currency. It's how you prove your value to the organization. So you never want to talk in broad strokes about something that you're really good at or something that, of course, I've done this before. You want to talk about specific times when you've done something successfully and the impact that those things have had on the organization. That's the primary focus. Broad general principle to always be thinking about is tell stories, talk about those accomplishments, and always bring it down to the results for the organization. In terms of sample questions to kind of practice for the hard ones. The hard ones are things like, tell me about a weakness, tell me about a time when you failed, be prepared to answer those kinds of difficult questions that might have more of a negative spin and how you will reframe that into a positive spin. Also, be sure that you're really comfortable telling your story. quickly about your career. If they say, just tell me a little bit about yourself, can you tell that career story quickly, succinctly, and in a compelling way? That's just something that anyone who's interviewing anywhere should be prepared to give their quick little introductory statement, and have it kind of roll off the tongue. So make sure that you've practiced with that. I have a ton of interview practice questions. I'm actually flipping over. I'm going to put another link in there for you guys for the interview guide that I have. So this is another e-guide, but it walks through the principles of interviewing. I just dropped that into chat. It walks through the principles of interviewing. It walks through the different types of interviews that you can expect, and it has how to answer those tricky questions in a positive way, as well as a ton of sample questions to practice with. The biggest thing is to know your accomplishments. If you've been working in your role for a long period of time, then you might have to go back and jog your memory. I always recommend that you talk to a trusted advisor or a significant other and just kind of, be brainstorming what some of those accomplishments are, because it'll help jog your memory a little bit and make notes for yourself for the future. This is one reason why you always want to keep an accomplishments list. So when you go in for an interview, you can just pull out your accomplishments list and pick the ones that are most applicable, that demonstrate the skills you want to demonstrate to your interviewer. So good luck to you, Susan. I think that's fantastic that you are going for your dream job, especially within your existing institution. That's always a good way to transition to something new, because your existing institution already knows, likes, and trusts you. So they're willing to take a little more risk on you if this is something that is a bit of a leap for you. So fantastic. Thanks for sharing the question. All right, I'm going to kind of browse through chat as well as I look for questions. You guys are so good. I really love that you share your experiences in here, because there's so much good stuff. I appreciate that Lisa says to practice behavioral-based questions. So that's where it's about your accomplishments. Behavioral style interviewing is any question that starts with, tell me about a time when. The principle behind behavioral style interviewing is that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So they're always looking for you to explain something you've done in the past that demonstrates how you'll do something in the future. That's where knowing those stories and knowing your accomplishments will really be useful. Behavioral style interviewing is used, I think about 70% of organizations right now use it. So it's a good one to be familiar with, and those accomplishments are where it's at for that. Oh, somebody's talking about a diffuser. For stress management, I have a little diffuser in my house with aromatherapy, and man, that is good stuff. Aromatherapy really works well for me for stress management. There's something about, smell that, that sense of smell is very, it's very powerful. And sometimes I think we forget how powerful it is. Okay, let's see. This question says, I'm currently reading Simon Sinek's Start With Why, which is amazing. I have his follow-up, Find Your Why, and Leaders Eat Last, Waiting in the Wings. What other authors are you loving these days? Ooh, fantastic question. So I think Simon Sinek is the one that has the viral video that's talking about millennials. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's who he is. And I haven't read his work. So what am I loving these days? I read a lot of spiritual books these days. I have done a lot of professional development reading for many years. I'm a big fan of some of the more traditional types of things with Jack Canfield, Brian Tracy, Stephen Covey, some of the more traditional authors. I like, for new authors, I'm really interested in Brene Brown's work, and she's the one that talks about the gifts of imperfection. It is more of kind of a spiritual book, but it's things that you can apply in all areas of your life, particularly in the workplace. when it comes to that book in particular, The Gifts of Imperfection, anybody who struggles with that feeling of not being good enough or perfectionism that can hold you back, that's a wonderful tool. So I'm reading those types of things. I'm reading A Course in Miracles Made Easy, which is another spiritual-based book. Let me think, what else have I picked up recently? Those are the big ones that I'm focused on right now. So I hope that's helpful. I know it's not necessarily professional development per se, but it's things that I think do apply in the workplace. I'm doing some research for a book that I want to be writing in the future about winning the inner game of career success, because I think so much of what happens in the workplace is mental, which is why people like Brene Brown really stand out to me. Another one, Sean, I want to say his name is Sean Archer or Anchor, Authentic Happiness. Is he Authentic Happiness? Or it's The Happiness Advantage. So those types of topics really interest me. The psychology of, positivity in the workplace. How do we take the situations that happen at work that are challenging, and how do we make them work for us? And how do we manage our mindset around those things? So that's what's really intriguing me these days. And hopefully you can Google some of those names that I just spit out and topics and see if those are helpful. Thanks for the question. I love that. I love racking my brain on that stuff. Okay, next question says, what kind of calendar program do you use to manage your work and personal calendar? Personally, I use Google Calendar. I also use an app called Teamwork. It's an online cloud-based task and project management system. And so it syncs up with my Gmail inbox. There's a bunch of cool features that I can do with it, and I use probably about 40 to 50% of the features. It allows me to manage tasks so that I can attach start dates and due dates. I can assign things to other people who are part of the system. It basically just is my central place to capture everything. So I use that as my master capture place. That's Teamwork. And then I typically use just plain old pen and paper. I have a variety of different planners because I love planners. I'm kind of an organizational geek in that I get really inspired and excited by buying a new planner. And we're coming up to a new year soon, which is my favorite time of year for that sort of thing. So I just, on a daily basis though, I will use planners to capture daily tasks and to-do lists and random things that kind of go through my mind. So I use all of those things in coordination. I think of it as a hybrid system, a mixture of paper and electronic tools. All right, the next question says, how can introverts cope with working in an open office environment in addition to incorporating the excellent de-stressing tactics mentioned earlier? Fantastic. So introverts in an open office environment, I will tell you, I think an open office environment is difficult for anyone, even extroverts. It is a lot to handle just noise-wise and distraction-wise. If you have any inclination towards attention deficit, I mean, man, it can pull you in 1,000 different directions. And you are face to face with so many people on a daily basis. It can be draining, especially for an introvert. Speaking of books that we were talking about earlier, there are some great books about introverts in the workplace and how to kind of manage that and use that to your advantage. So I would encourage maybe checking out some of those. I think that with anyone, we have to set our boundaries in an open office environment, and we need to establish some sort of parameters for how we manage our small space. If you do have a cubicle, are you able to make sure that you aren't, outward facing so that everybody walking by is grabbing your attention? Can you, set up your desk so that your back is to people walking by? Headphones are always an option for just a visible indicator to people to pause before interrupting you. So maybe play with some of those types of strategies. And then I think that you have to be smart about how you set limits with people. As an introvert, I'm an introvert too, and a lot of people wouldn't know that because I am very social as well. But I need my quiet me time to re-energize. And so in an open office environment, I have to do things like put on my tennies and go walk on my own on my lunch break so I can have 20 or 30 minutes of me time where I can get re-energized. And I have to say no sometimes when people want to go out to lunch or go to coffee together, even though the social piece of me wants to do it. I also know that the introvert side of me needs to appreciate some quiet downtime on my own. So I think it's hard for everybody. It's a great question, and maybe just kind of practice some of those boundary setting strategies and see how that goes. All right, next question here. Would you use a resume as a VA, virtual assistant, or would it be more like an advanced cover letter? Great question. It depends on what you're aiming for with being a virtual assistant. So if you wanted to start your own business, then probably you're going to be more inclined to do something like a professional profile. But a resume can also be useful because people do want to see your experience doing specific types of things that they're considering hiring you to do. So I recommend that you kind of have some of everything to show people. So as an entrepreneur myself, I have a resume, I have a professional profile, I have a LinkedIn profile, I have a website devoted just to me as a professional. I also have the Eat Your Career website that all of you see. So I suggest you put together a variety of things because you never know what your clients are going to want to see from you. And it's great to give them some options for different formats to get to know you. Great question. All right, next question here. How do I deal with coworkers who are given unfair privileges without sounding like a whiner? There's one person who gets special treatment when it comes to leaving early, jumps seniority for asking for PTO, reimbursement of training, better equipment, getting promotions before technically allowed. I feel you on this. This is a difficult situation. In the workplace, things are not fair. And I hear you also saying, like, I don't want to sound like a whiner, but this is really frustrating. Totally. It's a totally frustrating situation. But I do also want to share the hard truth with you that the workplace is unfair. It is set up to be unfair because it's typically a merit-based system where people are like the better you perform, typically the better you're treated. So it's in some ways that can be good, but then it can be unfairly taken advantage of where somebody is not like an exceptional performer, but they're getting all of these extra advantages and you're not quite sure why. There's just some favoritism going on. And I don't think in most cases that things like this can be addressed comfortably without appearing to be saying, but it's unfair. The reality is that you got to come back and say, okay, how is this impacting me? And how is it impacting my work? And for some of these things, there might be a real impact on you. So for example, getting seniority for paid time off. If that's impacting your ability to get paid time off, that's when it should be addressed. And you're really addressing it from the perspective of what's happening for me and how this is impacting my work and my situation here with the organization. In terms of getting better work equipment, that's one of those things that you don't want to sound petty by bringing it up. Some people tend to have better office chairs than others. And when somebody leaves, there's a rush to go grab the office chair. That's just kind of the way it works in most organizations. I would really sit back and ask yourself, what's the impact and what actually needs to be addressed versus what do I just need to let go and say, okay, it's not fair, but this is the workplace as it is. These things happen all the time. And if it's not impacting you directly, it's very difficult to raise the issue simply because you feel like on principle it's wrong. Very few leaders really want to get engaged in that kind of principled discussion. I know that's probably not a great answer for your situation, but I think it's the truth of how we have to deal with these situations in the workplace. Okay. Oh my gosh, Latasha says Staples and Office Depot are my candy store. That is so funny. I feel the exact same way. For me, Office Depot for sure. So my boyfriend's a construction worker, and he always says that his favorite store is Home Depot, and my favorite store is Office Depot. So each one of us just gets so excited when, ooh, we're having a Depot day. It's so funny. I love it when everybody has similar interests, and I know I'm not alone. Thank you, Laura, for saying Sean Acker, Achor. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. The Happiness Advantage. That's the book that I was referencing earlier about the psychology of happiness in the workplace. And she mentions his amazing TED Talk. His TED Talk is so funny. He is the fastest talker in the world. I've watched that TED Talk probably like 4 or 5 times just because it's so entertaining. So I highly recommend that for everyone. Sean Acker, Achor, The Happiness Advantage TED Talk, definitely. Thanks for sharing that, Laura. All right, 2 more questions, and then we are going to wrap up. So this question says, we often become a manager of projects when the supervisor that owns the project should ensure all the pieces are complete while we assist to make it happen. Is there a line between managing up to your supervisor and remaining in the assisting role? We cannot be successful as both. Okay, I'm going to read this one more time because I got a little bit confused here. We often become a manager of projects when the supervisor that owns the project should ensure all the pieces are complete while we assist to make it happen. Is there a line between managing up to your supervisor and remaining in the assistant role? We cannot be successful as both. The way I'm reading it, I am wanting to challenge the idea that you can't manage up and assist at the same time. Absolutely, those 2 things go hand in hand. If you are managing a project and you're assisting to make sure that it gets complete, and then you've got an owner, I'm sorry, Karen, I don't understand the question. Maybe someone in chat does understand it more than I do. But if you want to rephrase the question, I would love to address it, but I'm not quite seeing what the question is. If you're talking about managing up and assisting, I believe they go hand in hand. You have to. As a former executive assistant, I know that a big piece of my role was making sure that my executive stayed on task, on time, and on target. I had to manage him, and that's what he wanted from me. That was my role. So I did that whether we were working on projects or whether I was getting him to his next meeting. But please rephrase the question. I don't think I'm answering it at all. Next question from Cindy. What is your favorite planner? I too am a planner geek. Hail to the planner geeks. So I use Stephen Covey because that's like my tried and true. Not Stephen Covey, Franklin Covey. Franklin Covey, they merged 2 companies. So Franklin Covey is the one that I primarily use, but I also am falling in love with Erin Condren. I think that's the name of it, Condren. It's something that's really popular online. I follow a lot of Instagram accounts for planners. I'm such a geek. And I look at people's planners, and some people are really artistic and creative with them. And I don't get quite that creative, but they're very pretty. And they're a little more expensive. not as functional, in my opinion, as the Franklin Covey planners, but the Erin Condren ones are really pretty, and there's a lot of fun things that you can do with them if you're doing like life tracking. I will sometimes go on big kicks to track different elements of my life, whether it's weight or finances or water intake or steps or exercise, whatever it is. And so I love a pretty planner for what I call life tracking on whatever those types of things are that I want to be tracking. Okay, next question here. Okay, Karen, no need to apologize for your question. I'm sorry that I'm not understanding it. Liberty is trying to decipher. So Liberty says, I think Karen is asking whether she should talk to her supervisor because her supervisor is letting Karen do all the work that the supervisor should be doing. So let's address this, even if it's not necessarily perfectly Karen's question, but the question of, okay, I'm doing work that really my supervisor or my boss should be doing. That's a difficult situation, especially for people who might be in the assistant role, because the assistant role, by and large, is to help make your executive look good and to do things to make your executive's life easier. So a lot of times, anything that you can do to take off your executive's plate certainly falls into the purview of your role. If it's something that you really feel is outside of the territory of your authority or your ability, then yes, absolutely, you need to have a conversation with your supervisor. But if you are in an assistant role and you're doing something that you feel like just on principle, again, back to that principled concept, just on principle that your supervisor should be doing, and it shouldn't be something on your plate, maybe open up the conversation and ask and make sure that you're understanding responsibilities and roles. But as an assistant, I typically do think that if something can be taken off your executive's plate, that is the role of the assistant. I hope that's helpful. I still feel like I'm probably not nailing Karen's question perfectly. But let's see here. I'm just going to kind of go through a couple of other questions that are in here in comments. Elizabeth says, this is why reputations are so important. Even in the short term, no credit is given to you for the work you did. Eventually, people will see the validity of your contributions. Yeah, so maybe that's one of the components here, is that you're doing all this work and then your supervisor is getting all the credit for it. And that is such a difficult component of being in an assistant role. Assistants are the unsung hero. They are the invisible, man behind the curtain doing all of this work. And then 99% of the time, the executives are getting the recognition for it. And it's really their responsibility, or in this case, the supervisor's responsibility, to share that and say, a critical part of this project being successful is the role that Karen played in this. And if that's not happening, then maybe having a conversation to say, I don't know how you would word this, but if what you're looking for is the ability to grow your own reputation, then maybe have that conversation with your supervisor and say, I'm really looking to establish my reputation as being a critical part of some of these projects. Is there anything you can do to help me have more visibility around this? So you're just kind of opening it up to your supervisor. Again, I'm not sure that that's addressing the question that was at hand, but it's a good point that Elizabeth was making. Let's see here. I'm just kind of glancing through comments and questions. I see a lot of people are mentioning Brene Brown. I think it's so cool when I consider her kind of a new author, or a new person in the space, but she's probably not all that new. I know she did some things with Oprah a while back. But whenever you stumble upon somebody like that just has like this amazing message that inspires you, And then you meet other people, you find out that other people know about this person too. It's so exciting. I love it that everybody's saying, oh, Brene Brown. Yes, I know her. That's great. So I'm just kind of looking through comments here. Thanks everybody for sharing in the chat menu. I appreciate it. Lots of people were saying that they walk for lunch, some good stress management strategies that were shared. I hope you guys have found this helpful. I always go back and read the chat thoroughly so they can know about all the conversations happening. But I sure do hope that you get a ton of value, not only out of what I share, but out of being able to connect with one another. I think that's such a great part of this. So thanks everybody for being here for the live session. We will have a webinar coming up in 2 weeks. We're talking about the power of focus. So back to Liberty's question where she was asking about how do I deal in this open office environment? We're going to talk about the aspect of managing distractions and how you can hone concentration and focus. That's a big area that I've been very excited about recently. Some of this, psychology type of stuff that I'm interested in learning about. That's a big piece for me. I know all of us feel scattered. So we're going to be talking about focus coming up in 2 weeks. Please be here for the live session. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. I will see you soon. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.